Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Beyond the Headlines. I'm Andy Shain, managing editor for Post and Courier Myrtle Beach. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about everything: development, lawsuits, new stuff coming to town, and a little bit of politics. Can't get away from politics really anywhere these days. Well, I'm going to be here chatting today with Post and Courier Myrtle Beach reporter Rick Caines. I want to say thanks for being here, Rick.
I'm excited to be here, and just happy to get started and just talk about what's going on in the Myrtle Beach area.
Well, great. Hey, Rick, tell the folks a little bit about yourself. How long have you been working with the Post and Courier Myrtle Beach Georgetown Times, and where you're from and that kind of thing?
Well, I'm originally from Loris. I moved away for a bit, Philadelphia area, Arizona area. Came back. I started with the Times probably 4 years ago. So I was back. I was original reporter with the Times. Covered everything from city government to education, anything that crime. And now I'm back with the Post and Courier Myrtle Beach as a business reporter and a courts reporter, and everything in between.
So, being originally from Loris, you have a killer bog recipe, right?
Exactly. Well. Oh, I know what tastes good. Let's put it that way.
And also, having spent some time from Philadelphia, I'm also from the Philadelphia area. We promise to keep the Philadelphia sports talk to a minimum. Rick and I often talk about these kinds of things. He actually sometimes goes back to Philadelphia to go to Eagles games and things like that. Makes me super jealous. But as I said, we'll keep that down to a minimum today. What do you say, Rick?
Yeah. The state of Philadelphia sports, and we'll just keep that quiet.
That's very good. But if you have any questions about the Ben Simmons, James Harden trades, our take on it, if it does come through, we'll be happy to entertain that. And that's actually a good reminder. A couple things. First of all, we're going to take your questions today. So please feel free. You'll see the sort of little Q&A thing at the bottom of your Zoom. You can send us questions. We'll answer a few at the end. And also be sure to check in the chat. You're going to find the email addresses for Rick and me, as well as our Twitter handle, so you can follow us on social media. And again, we do often do that. Also, one more thing I want to give a shout out to Rick. Congratulations on your daughter being Teen Miss Myrtle Beach over the weekend.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Happy dad.
So what's next? What's the next contest she goes to?
She will go to a state level pageant, I think in July.
All right. Well, very good. So if you're looking for any, I guess, used tiaras, come to Rick at this point. Well, very good. Well, great. So let's go ahead and dive into the topics today. Rick, I want to go ahead and dive into something that you have been covering yourself pretty closely in Georgetown. It's kind of the big story in Georgetown, the reopening of the Liberty Steel Mill. It had been closed for close to a year. There was a deadline approaching for February 1st. If they didn't reopen, there was going to be this rezoning. And they opened just in time, but there's a big but. The city is reviewing things, seeing if the mill is doing enough to justify being open and avoid this rezoning. Talk a little bit about what's at stake here, and if the mill ends up closing, what folks in Georgetown hope to do with this site right in the middle of downtown, right on the waterfront.
Yeah, like you said, back in January, partially open with about 65 workers. The city was concerned that they're not meeting an ordinance that was passed back in 2018 that would have switched zoning from heavy industrial to a mixed use. So city officials recently went and inspected the site. They turned over those findings to Chris Iglesias, as Georgetown's former planning director, who's now Newberry County administrator. But he will go over those findings, and he's made a letter. And we have recently learned that the city has turned this letter over to steel mill officials. We're waiting to hear about what this letter consists of.
I mean, I know that that's a big question of just what is it that they found. And of course, Becky Ryan, we asked for questions as you signed up, and Becky asked a really good question that sort of sets up the next point of this, which is if Georgetown decides, let's say that letter says Liberty Steel is not meeting the requirements of this agreement, so thus they would have to close, and it would become more of a mixed use development. Is Georgetown prepared to fight in court? And assuming they win, the city wins, who's going to pay for all the cleanup at this site? Because it's been Liberty Steel Mill has been there for decades as a steel manufacturing plant. And certainly, there's probably going to be some environmental work that needs to be done.
Yeah, like you said, they employed more than 1,500 workers back in the 70s. It's hard to say. Liberty Steel officials say they're complying with the ordinance, but it's hard to see this avoiding a court fight, basically, in the future. But we'll see.
I mean, it makes a certain amount of sense. I mean, if you've taken the effort and the time to try to reopen this mill, and you think you're following sort of the letter of this ordinance, and then the city comes in and says, well, we don't think you're really doing the right things. And again, the line here may be this. Rick, the mill used to produce steel as well as turn it into these wire rods that are used in tires and bridge cables, right?
Yes. But right now, they're not producing steel at the moment. They're just turning large blocks of steel into the wire rods, like you said. And there's an ordinance. The mill is expected to produce steel, so there's a question of whether they're meeting that ordinance. So we'll see. We'll see what the letter says. The mayor said in the past that the 65 jobs that are coming. Don't compare to what the impact of transforming that site. They see it as a tourism-centric attraction, basically turn into to bring more folks into Georgetown, make Georgetown more of a destination, kind of like Charleston or Myrtle Beach. And that's already happening. You see the hotel coming on Front Street in the former Georgetown Times building. A developer is turning the old electric department into electric apartments and open air marketing in the future. So we'll see how that turns out.
So the idea is to turn Georgetown from a place where you just kind of pass through between Myrtle Beach and Charleston on 17 to a place you might want to stop and stay. Correct.
And I also talked to the longtime president of the union at the steel mill, but he still feels that it still visions the mill in full operation. He doesn't think the city should go that route of being more tourism dependent.
Well, it's interesting because obviously it's that sort of that classic fight between manufacturing and the service industry, the idea of going more towards that. And again, the mill has always sort of been right in the heart of the downtown for Georgetown. So you can envision why maybe city leaders want to take something that's very industrial out of their core and try to make it something a little different, again, to match up, especially with that waterfront that's there in Georgetown, for sure. So obviously something we'll be keeping tabs on. So keep up with Rick on his reporting on this, because we're trying to get our hands up on that letter and try to understand what's going to happen next at this site. So let's go ahead and continue on sort of on the business front and on the development front. One of the things in the time that I have been sort of helping run the Myrtle Beach newsroom, run the Georgetown Times, has been, certainly anyone who's gone down to the Grand Strand has just seen over the years how much more development there is, how many more homes, of course, and then how much more retail and everything else that goes along to support so many more people coming down there. And for folks who don't know, Horry County is the fastest growing county in the state of South Carolina. It's grew by more than 30% in the past decade based on the 2020 census that came out. I mean, it's amazing to think how much this county, this area has grown, and of course that includes even the areas on the Waccamaw Neck in Georgetown County. So that said, development is going gangbusters, but there seems to be kind of maybe a little bit of a change going on. Seeing a lot of protests, of efforts to maybe slow some of this development, especially as it creeps into more rural areas or more off the beaten paths. Rick, what do you notice? As you said, you've been kind of around for 4 years. What's changing? What are people doing, and how are the local governments reacting to what the residents are telling them?
Well, officials see, everybody else could see, there's not a lot of land left on the coast. Everything's been built up. So naturally, there seems to be a westward expansion. And unfortunately, That's turning more towards rural areas where there used to be farms. And it seems available. Traffic is pushing. There's traffic on the coast is great. I mean, everybody's in it every day, but it seems there's a westward expansion trying to go west.
And where in particular have we seen most of this coming to the west?
Well, it's the area around Highway 90 in Conway is a big area that's seeing both sides of the issue. And then the Burgess area, which is near 707 on the South Strand, we're seeing a lot more development on that side too.
It's interesting, you named two areas that are along the two major highways that opened in the past 20, 30 years. South Carolina 22, South Carolina 31. The idea of 90, that sort of that east-west highway, the bypass, the Conway bypass that has sort of, I guess, gives you obviously easy access back to 501, back to 17. So that makes 90 much more popular. And then of course, the idea that South Carolina 31 is there, get you near Sockasty. More or less, I guess, is also obviously building that, because again, you can get on 31 and then get yourself onto 501 and out of town, or obviously to wherever you want to go on other parts of the Strand. It's just amazing that it's going there. But so what's happening? When these projects come up, what tends to happen at these meetings? And again, how are the governments reacting when these big projects go before planning commissions or go before councils?
Well, see the people that live in these communities like Burgess, Loris, Ainer, they're starting to resist, and you see at these meetings, you see an overflow of people with these that they don't want these developments in their neighborhoods where there used to be farmland, and they just like the rural life. For example, there was a massive planned community that was going to come on 707, like you said, near St. James High School, by a developer who developed, if you know, Prince Creek in that area. It would have added probably more than 3,000 homes and 500,000 square feet of commercial space in that area. And they held workshops in the area, and there was a lot of opposition. But at the last minute, the developer pulled the project. The planning commission wasn't in favor of it, but at the last minute, he pulled the project. So we never heard of why he pulled the project. We don't know if he's going to bring the project back. One of the main opposition points that it would have made more people to the area schools. St. James Elementary and High School, they're already at over 100% capacity already. And people just could see that community coming to that area.
I guess the idea is that people don't want sort of mini Carolina forests coming to their backyard.
Correct.
They've seen what's happened in that area. And, I guess I could imagine that they're saying, we have 2-lane roads or and even 4-lane roads that are congested. Why are you adding so many more? Do you think it's a matter of that? It's like when people sort of go very grandiose, like they did in Burgess, that was going to be what, 3,000, 4,000 homes.
Yeah.
That's it. Or is it a matter of even just sometimes it's just 50 or 100 homes, that people are even protesting at this point?
Yeah. For example, key example, back in December, there was a planning commission meeting. There was two projects up. One was an Ainer, which was smaller than 3,000 homes. It was about 300 homes. And then, 70, it was less than the Loris. There was an Ainer project and a Loris project. The Ainer project was 73 homes. Loris project was about 300 homes. The Ainer project failed, and then but the Loris project, they passed. So we're seeing that too. Officials will let one pass and sometimes one fail, and which sometimes heats up the residents too.
It's interesting. Again, you're talking about Aner and Loris as places that are building homes where people who may not necessarily be from Horry County want to live. You know what I mean? Again, they're coming down to retire or for jobs, and they're moving to these more rural areas. Just obviously from your experience in Loris, how has that changed in the sense of the idea that it's not just the locals anymore?
Yeah, like there's so many people moving down here, and like I said before, there's no land really available at the coast anymore, and there's all this open that used to be farmland, like in Loris, Aner, the rural areas, that is just people. Some people sell their family's land and they get out, and the nearby residents of that area, they don't like that.
I can imagine that it's also bringing together that whole thing of, I'm still operating my farm, but my neighbor who for some reason is not going to use it as a farm anymore wants to, of course, turn it into a subdivision. And how does that mesh together when everything's been agricultural land, sort of acres and acres together for so many decades? It's just, as I said, it's amazing. My own experience is going to Bucksport, where a relative has a river house down there, and just amazed at how many homes are down in Bucksport, considering how far that is really from Conway, how far that is from the beach. And these seem to be homes, again, that sometimes are where professionals live, people who are working, not just retirees. So it's always interesting to see how much this development has gone out. And of course, with prices the way they are, you can certainly get more home in the interior than I'm sure you can at the coast at this time. So
Yeah,
it's amazing how that's changed, and that's a big story we've been covering, and sort of we're going to continue to cover, as it is. Boom and balance is what we call sort of this effort across the Post and Courier. We're doing it in Charleston and Greenville, and of course in Columbia and Myrtle Beach, but looking at this idea that, again, as these areas are growing, Charleston's growing, Greenville's growing, Columbia's growing, of course, is the Grand Strand, boom, really growing. How do you measure all of that? How do you get schools that aren't too crowded? How do you get roads that aren't congested too much, so that people can get where they need to get, especially if they need to get to work, and that kind of thing. So it's just amazing to consider that, and something that we will continue to pay attention to. So Rick, it's time for the political time. As I said, we were talking about a little bit of everything. So we talked a little bit about industry in Georgetown and the change there. We talked a little bit about all the big growth and development changes happening around the Strand. But now let's talk about politics, which also could have a change. The Grand Strand is in the national spotlight. We have a congressional race that, in the 7th district with Congressman Tom Rice, that has gotten a bunch of attention because Donald Trump basically doesn't want him in Congress anymore. For those, just again, to recap, Tom Rice was one of 10 House Republicans to vote to impeach then President Trump after the January 6th Capitol riots, for how he reacted to the riots, and obviously some of his actions leading up to it. Tom Rice has said, I voted for President Trump twice. I believe in his policies. This was sort of a bridge too far for him. That has sort of put a bullseye with the former president. And because of that, Congressman Rice had as many as 13 Republican challengers for the primary. Think about it. You're a congressman who's been in office since 2012, and you have 13 challengers coming at you. Now, the good news is, I guess, for Tom Rice, is that number is down to 9 or so. But I'm really, as someone, if you don't know my background, I covered politics in the State House for a decade for both the state newspaper and the Post and Courier, including covering 3 presidential races and a few governor's races. And one of the things that's interesting is that I think we can honestly expect this group of 9 to dwindle fairly quickly, because Russell Fry, a state representative from Surfside Beach, won Trump's endorsement earlier this month. So basically, the president has anointed someone who he would like to see succeed Congressman Rice on that.
How did Fry become Trump's pick?
It's interesting. I mean, Fry was sort of the one with name recognition in the race. We did have Ken Richardson, who's the school board chairman. We did have a former Myrtle Beach mayor, Mark McBride, in the race. We also had a conservative sort of media personality, Graham Allen, that was in the race as well. Those were the sort of the folks that people knew. But Fry has really built a good reputation for himself in the state house. He's pretty much sort of the number 5 ranking member of the Republican caucus in the state house, despite being in the legislature a short amount of time. Graham Allen, who lives up in Anderson and was, I think, going to kind of use a temporary address that he had, or a part-time home in the Grand Strand to sort of justify his residency, had Trump support, but clearly was going to have issues with that residency. He wasn't going to move down to the Strand full time. It didn't seem like he's up in Anderson. So he ended up bowing out soon before Fry got Trump's endorsement. So it seemed to sort of clear the field, at least of the Trump backed candidates. Graham Allen had raised the second most amount of money behind Tom Rice in the race at that point, but that left with Graham Allen getting out. Fry was now the most popular of the fundraisers left at this point. He had actually raised more money than the other candidates all put together when you take away the loans that they had given their campaigns. A lot of these candidates had bolstered their campaign coffers with their loans for themselves. So this did exactly what Trump wanted, to clear the field, to make it hopefully a one-on-one race as much as possible, Fry versus Rice. And I think that's what we're going to see when as we get closer to the June primary.
Is Fry gaining any traction in the race?
It seems like he did. I mean, the endorsement, the day after the endorsement, Russell Fry held a news conference at the State House with a number of lawmakers, including 3 from the South Carolina 7th District. They included Heather Crawford, the state representative, also from the south side of the Strand, who is endorsing him. But most importantly, it included House Speaker Jay Lucas from Hartsville, who Hartsville is in the 7th District. It covers most of the PD, and he is endorsing Russell Fry. And in fact, I'm told he's going to be holding a fundraiser for him. And for, again, and for those who don't know, the House Speaker is pretty much, one of the top 3 or 4 most powerful politicians in the state. This is a legislature heavy state where the governor suggests a budget, doesn't really have much say on directly on legislation except for signing it or vetoing it. So really, the House Speaker, the leader of the Senate, the leaders in the Senate are really the power brokers in it. So to have the House Speaker behind Russell Fry is going to be a good get. It'll be interesting to see how others fall in line. That said, Tom Rice, I think, remains popular among a good group of people, in the district. He also has a ton of money, though, of course, I would expect that Russell Fry will be sort of riding the coattails of Donald Trump and being able to raise money. And of course, we're already hearing about the idea that Donald Trump will be coming to the Grand Strand somewhere at some point to, of course, stump for Russell Fry and sort of make his presence known, which would help energize things a bit. So I think this is going to be an interesting race, to say the least. And again, one that's going to gather a lot of attention. So at this point, I just do want to remind you that if you do have any questions for us that we can answer, we'd be happy to address them. You can put a question in the Q&A at this point. And what one of the things, Rick, while we're kind of maybe waiting for some questions and to see if some will come in, is to talk a little bit about what's happening with some of the businesses. I mean, you cover business for us. What are some of the new things that are coming in? I think I remember there was a noodle shop or something that was pretty popular that was coming in. A couple of other things. What kind of trends are you kind of seeing retail wise lately?
Well, we're starting to see it pick back up, after the pandemic. I'm thinking during the pandemic, people didn't want to open up restaurants or new businesses, but we're starting to see more openings. Like you said, there's a noodle shop near Surfside Beach off 17. I haven't been myself, but I hear it's very popular. I've heard good things about it. in Merle's Inlet, at the former Still Mall, Inlet Square Mall, in the parking lot of former pizza place, they're opening up a bar arcade,
Mhm.
which is interesting in itself. You have a bar, there's going to be a restaurant, and there's going to be an arcade. There's going to be arcade games in it. We'll see how that does. It should be popular. I mean, I'm a fan of arcades myself. And then on in the north end,
Hang on, Rick. You gave me an opening there. What was your favorite game?
probably back in the day, probably Pac-Man.
Okay. All right. Very good. I was a Galaga guy. I wasn't very good at it, but I loved playing it.
Yeah, I wasn't good. I'm not good at Pac-Man, but I like playing it. And then on the north end, in the former Bilo Shopping Center on Main Street, my indoor go-karting spot, K1 Speed, is about to open here in the next few weeks. That should get a lot of interest with the vacationers coming down starting in March, especially the our Canadian friends come down in March.
Generally, how are restaurants doing? Are they coming back? Did most of them kind of make it through the pandemic, or did we see some turnover in there?
We did see a little bit turnover. Most of them are still doing well. In one case of a closing, Jimmy's Hibachi, they have some locations, one in Myrtle Beach, but they closed the Pawleys Island location. And we are seeing some restaurants get back to where they were before the pandemic.
Yeah. And it seems like also, and one of the other things you noted too, I think you've written a story about this, about how overall the tourism business has really came back strong to Myrtle Beach post-pandemic, maybe in part because South Carolina lifted some of those restrictions early on. But talk a little bit about the tourism numbers and the airport numbers you were seeing, especially towards the end of last year.
Well, Myrtle Beach International had their best year ever this past year. In fact, during the summer, they led the state in some passenger tallies. And that continued throughout the fall season. They just kept going strong. Like you said, the state of South Carolina opened up sooner, so more people could come. And there were a lot of restrictions up north. So naturally, everybody wanted to come down to where they could vacation. And naturally, Myrtle Beach is a spot. And then that's led to high occupancy numbers in the fall. And it just continued through the fall Christmas season. Some of the shows were very popular in Christmas along the Grand Strand.
And in fact, you had a story about how popular it is now to come to the beach for Thanksgiving, for Christmas, maybe to have family outings, or maybe for big families to get together and to say, hey, let's go to the beach and play golf and do those other things.
Yes, government officials, city officials, chamber officials are starting to see that. They want to get more visitors here in the wintertime, which was historically a small season, slow season. And then, like, for example, Myrtle Beach put a ice rink where the former pavilion used to be temporarily during the Christmas time, which was very, very popular. The city of North Myrtle Beach has a very popular light show that's people come from states away to see their sports park. And then national media is starting to notice this. USA Today is named Brook Green Gardens one of the top holiday light shows in the United States. So even the holidays are now starting to become busy.
That's right. As if the Grand Strand needs to get any more busy, but again, it is the top tourist destination in the state of South Carolina by far. I know there's a lot of a misconception out there that people think Charleston or maybe even Hilton Head is bigger, but by far the Myrtle Beach area is the revenue driver for tourism in the state. So, Rick, I want to say really thank you for taking your time and being here today. Of course, I know obviously I can make some sort of joke that I'm the boss and I asked you to be here, but obviously still I really appreciate it because I think you provide some great insight for me as someone who's obviously getting back into things, all things Myrtle Beach, but also for our readers as well. Just a couple quick notes. A reminder that this chat you'll get an email link to it for those of you who signed up for this, but also for those who don't, you want to point it out to them. So maybe we said something that was interesting, you want to share, it'll be on our YouTube page, the Post and Courier YouTube page. So be there. I've got one big programming note. We're going to have a ribbon cutting and an open house at our new office in Georgetown. We've moved our offices in Georgetown, just did it this month. We're going to have a big open house ribbon cutting with the chamber down there. It's at noon on February 17th. The new office is at 1165 North Fraser Street. This will also be on our Twitter feed as well. That's PC Myrtle Beach. If you want to do that. And if you come on down, we're going to have refreshments. We're going to give a chance to give away an advertising package, and you'll get to meet our reporters. You'll get to meet Rick. You'll get to meet our sports reporter, Danny Kelly, and our new Georgetown reporter, who's actually going to get to see him even before we start paying him. We'll tell him thank you. I'll buy Mike a breakfast or something to come on down. But Mike Woodell, our new Georgetown reporter, will also be there. So please come on down, meet, talk about our news coverage for those of you who are down that way. So please do on noon, February 17th, our open house in our new office at 1165 North Fraser Street. Just real quick, just want to let you know that we have free newsletters. There's a ton of them. So we have a number here in the Myrtle Beach, Georgetown areas you can sign up for, but as well as the Post and Courier has a number. It's a great way to keep up with the news, but also kind of get a sense of what we do. And also, please remember to pay for the kind of coverage that Rick and myself and everyone else at the Post and Courier gives you. Subscribe. That's what helps pay for this. That's what helps make us keep on covering Liberty Steel, talk about politics, cover development. I mean, I think Rick, you even mentioned the whole idea about the 7-Eleven on the north end of Myrtle Beach and how that has been a thing. You've covered that very well. So again, the way you do that is subscribe, and you can just obviously go to postandcourier.com/subscribe. There's a big button on top of the homepage in case you just want to do that. So Rick, thank you again for doing this. Thank you for everyone for joining us today. And you know what? Have a great week. Have a great weekend.